So the age-old question of, is Bitcoin worth investing in? A lot of people say no. I understand that. Feel free to let me know in the comments what you think. But most people that I know in the market, especially with being an educator and been doing it since 2016, a lot of people think that the wealth isn't in Bitcoin, which baffles me, right? I think something different. And I've always mentioned it. If you know me, you know I talk about Bitcoin dominance quite a lot. I talk a lot about the total 3/BTC. I talk about growing your Bitcoin with altcoins, and I talk about always have a Bitcoin. Nothing's changed, but something has changed with Bitcoin, and I think you need to pay attention. So moving forward with life, as you know, right? Let's talk about it. Bitcoin ETF, relatively new. Start of the year, this all happened. They went through the roof in retrospect of index ETFs and stuff like that. Now, we all know, and not everyone's an investor, but we've got to look at the facts that there is people that really want to accumulate Bitcoin. You've got, as I mentioned, institutions here are working alongside. You've got like some Michael Saylor. You've got multiple people always want to strive to get some Bitcoin. But there's a few reasons for this. Let's first, in this video, outline something. We're going to talk about the cycles. Where are we? We're going to talk about runes. We're going to talk about ordinals. We're going to talk about the percentage share of that. And also, the most important thing of this video, which is why you need to stay around, is why you should be using Bitcoin to grow your overall net worth and your wealth. It should be your dominant currency, not another altcoin, not USD. You're going to think in Satoshis. I've always said this. Nothing's changed. And this will allow you to become a better investor when you think longer term, right? So, cycles for one. This is kind of the price performance of Bitcoin in terms of the cycle low using Glassnode on the freebie section because I'm a cheapskate. Feel free to sponsor this video, Glassnode. Thanks, just saying. We're kind of on track a little bit going into Q4, which I've talked about it a number of times, often very good. And as much as we've had a few little issues with the economic climate and most importantly conflict in the Middle East, we're all right now. If we're going to go into a rampant bull market, and let's just say let's just say a carbon copy, I don't like using the word carbon copy, of the 2018-2022 cycle, and we top out, and if you've subscribed to the channel and you've watched my videos before, feel free, if you've not yet done so, subscribe. You will know that I've talked a lot about potential this area where we may well top out, which is in line with previous halving levels, right? I.e. duration of time. So that all well and good and tickety-boo. But I think people are missing the point massively, and they're talking about how hard this cycle has been, and it has been if you've been holding altcoins. I've been mainly Bitcoin for most of it. Very, very lucky to be in that situation. And my eyes over the last couple of months have been slowly opening to how the Bitcoin ecosystem has massively changed, right? Now, runes are new. You then ordinals, BRC20s. There's potential opportunity for smart contracts to be built on Bitcoin. You've got stacks, which is the biggest layer 2, and other areas around layer 2s and sidechains, which could scale on the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's an interesting proposition where we could be going. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I'm not going to be doing the technical jargon. I have briefly spoken about runes before, but in terms of overall market cap of a number of basically meme coins at the minute, $1 billion. I know. Absolute madness. Nearly 1 million holders. People are having fun. And I know everyone hates a meme coin or loves a meme coin, right? But the reality is, though, runes could be the gateway for a fungible token on the Bitcoin ecosystem, which eventually over time may well lead to developers building protocols on the Bitcoin ecosystem, which will then allow Bitcoiners to do stuff instead of going over to native chains. Remember, we're going to come to this in the end, but Bitcoin has a lot of wealth. Oof, a lot of wealth, right? If they don't have to move chain and they can use the protocol, the best blockchain, the most secure blockchain, the most adopted blockchain in the world, they're going to use it. That's huge. So in terms of runes currently right now, and this is very early, I know, 22 of them are over $1 million in terms of market capitalization. Dog is the biggest meme coin on Bitcoin, which is fine. However, we look at other meme coins and other ecosystems, probably a bit of a ceiling to go to. I also hold BDC and I also hold BIP, right? They're all speculative plays. If you want to crack on and do some research, I would advise you to look into the Bitcoin ecosystem first, understand runes, and then understand ordinals and understand percentage market share, and then understand the entire ecosystem as a whole to understand that they're very small versus the rest of the ecosystem in terms of altcoins. Now, as I've alluded to in a previous video, we've talked about the meme coins. That is the top 3 in terms of market share, right? This is relatively old, probably changed right now. But I do believe it's about 0.16% in terms of the entire ecosystem of Bitcoin is meme coins versus Ethereum versus Solana. They're the top 3. So you get the idea in terms of why it is small. And most of it is dog, which is fair enough, right? Obviously, as I say, numbers have changed, but just to give you a little bit of gravity there. And when we pull back the curtains and we talk about ordinals in terms of market capitalization versus the Bitcoin market cap, it's very small. And this is from the 2nd of October. But when you talk about the NFT market versus obviously the Ethereum one, there's a lot of room to the upside. Now, if you don't know this, ordinals are inscriptions, basically like NFTs. Yeah, right, I know. The craze happened. And it probably will happen again. And we've got to look at this in obvious sense. If ordinals inscriptions can represent an equivalent market cap to NFTs with or on Ethereum, it would represent just 0.72% of the Bitcoin's market cap. It would imply an 18x for multiple of the ordinals and inscriptions while representing only 0.5% of the value of the traditional art market cap. So basically, they're very small. And again, we talk about Bitcoin, developers, gravitation towards it. It may well get a lot more interest. And I think people are starting to wake up to that now. And the final bit around obviously all of this and the basic sense of it in terms of what ordinals are and the differences between them is the fact that NFTs had a lot of pressure in the prior cycle. But ordinals had a little bit, just a small little sliver. 2023, ordinals flipped the Ethereum NFTs in attention. That's pretty big. Volume, 2024. 2025, probably do the entire market cap. I think so as well. When you think about overall wealth, and we think about the poor performance as well of Ethereum, you know, if people are going to open up to the idea of ordinals and inscriptions and also runes, etc., on Bitcoin, there's an obvious way, and I've talked about it, to grow your Bitcoin without leaving the ecosystem at all, using and keeping on the same protocol. That's pretty big. Now, I know a lot of Bitcoin maxis hate ordinals, and I am not a fan of NFTs. I've never ever got my head around them. Will I buy one? Possibly yes, if they're low enough and I look at them and I get my head around it. But for me, it's more about runes. Personally, I prefer them. But ordinals could well drive mass mania, and we all know retailers love a game, love a graphic, and when you put it as an NFT, yeah, they're probably going to go for it. The final bit to talk about, obviously, is BRCs. Now, these are BRC 20s. Basically, they're the older version of like a rune. They've been around for a bit longer. They're a bit slower. They're not as scalable versus obviously a rune. Rune can scale with Lightning Network. And an ordinal is obviously an inscription with an NFT sort of twist to it, a graphic. So they're all different, but there's 3 main elements, right? That's the basic part of it. Wizard here is going as a rune very, very soon, a couple of weeks or so. Audi was the first ever Bitcoin token, essentially. So that's quite rightly probably the highest by far. So yeah, there's quite a lot to look at. Now let's talk about the wealth factor. Now I know, talking about all the other stuff beforehand, there are ways and means where you could potentially grow your Bitcoin via using Bitcoin by putting Bitcoin into a rune or whatever, or an ordinal, and then selling it hopefully for higher for more Satoshis. Over time, developing wealth. Right, we're on the track. Now, I've talked about this before. I've talked about my Patreon. Feel free if you want to jump in the link below. There's a Patreon to a Discord, which has all the alpha. It's ridiculous. But I was asked this question on my MMQs not so long ago about the power law model. And I, first to admit, I think it's all bollocks. I don't agree with it. Money, it'll be ridiculous. In terms of liquidity, all that kind of stuff. I understand scarcity model and all that kind of stuff, but I do think that would be absolutely berserk. I think we are at a point where Bitcoin could generate unbelievable wealth and stay stable and not be $10 million. That's kind of my point here, right? When we look at that factor, it's huge. Now, it is huge. It's a massive amount. And obviously, we've got to look at other metrics and people talk about. And this is obviously how it kind of looks and works. And on paper, yeah, it kind of, it marries up a little bit. But I think for me, as a personal, normal human, if we're anywhere near $1 million, I'd be like, what? I think you all would be as well, right? So let's not go too ham on it, right? Let's not go too crazy because I think it's mental in itself, right? In my honest opinion, I think the generational wealth that we're going to have as our age group potentially, or maybe younger, older, whatever, is all about utilizing Bitcoin as your dominant currency, which is where the important side is, where we look at the likes of gold, where we look at the likes of the S&P 500 as well, and how that's grown over time and people will get wealthier. That should be the exact same thing that you should be doing right now, stacking Satoshis. No matter how many sats you are getting, you need to keep stacking the fucking things, right? Because eventually over time, it's going to be worth more. And it's worth more means you can sell less and you can diversify and you can enjoy that wealth as a percentage, and you can put wealth elsewhere and have money and not having to use USD, Great British Pound, Euros, because that is dying, as you know. But guys, just remember, stuff like this, take it with a pinch of salt, because you got to think in your own situation. If you've got a couple of Bitcoin and you're thinking, wow, it's going to 10 million, you know, it's a very, very interesting proposition because there's a lot of people with a lot of Bitcoin. So let's talk about wealth, right? And I know people are going to be like, oh, but you're talking about gold. But realistically, gold has historically, over a period of time, gone up, right? Gold is important to the metric. Now, I've alluded to it. Let's be blunt here. I often get comments about people going, oh, but Bitcoin is pointless because you can't spend it. You can't go to a shop and, I don't know, get a haircut and use your Bitcoin. And then I think to myself, well, you can't sell your Coca-Cola shares and do it. You can't go to the shop and throw a gold bar at someone's head, or silver, or oil. But people invest in it, right? Makes sense, doesn't it? And I think people forget that. And people forget about luxury cars. They forget about fine art. They forget about property. As wealth, the more property you got, the more money you make. The more gold bars you got, the more wealth you got. The more Bitcoin you got, the more wealthy you are, right? In digital assets, different. So I think people need to start thinking about that in more obvious sense. And this is why I'm saying stack your sats. Great. Why? Because history tells us it goes up, right? Yeah. Same with gold, right? Gold. If you were investing in gold many, many years ago and you just constantly just been doing it, what's it been doing? Well, in actual fact, it's made you money. It's beaten inflation. The exact same situation is with the likes of the S&P 500. If you've been buying this dollar cost average, guess what? You've been getting an average return on your money, and it's just been gradually going up and up and up. Same with other situations around investments, right? Now, again, with the likes of Bitcoin, what's been happening, boys and girls? Let me just go to the Bitcoin chart from, I don't know, Bitstamp, for example. I know it's boom and bust, it's very, very different, right? But ultimately, if you can control yourself and you know that certain premiums of Bitcoin's a bit flashy and a bit bubblish, maybe diversify and then come back to it and then rebuy low and get your sats, and just always, what I do, and I've mentioned this in my Patreon, is I will have a baseline layer of how much I want. I'll just keep all of it. If I've made too much money, I will diversify a percentage of that into multiple things. I will keep some stable currencies and I will maybe make them work, I'll do whatever, and then put it back in at the lows. I will just manage it. That's where we are kind of with Bitcoin at the minute. I think over time, it will become more stable, more steady, and more gradual, and the peaks and the troughs will not be as savage, I hope. Because that's a problem, that's one of the flaws. But in terms of me as an honest person telling you guys, why aren't you even considering Bitcoin? Because I think a lot of the altcoins, as good as some of them are, a lot of them are shit. I've hopefully hold my hand up and say I've lost a lot of money on altcoins. I've lost loads of money on altcoins. I've made some money. I've made some Bitcoin with altcoins, and I've lost a lot. It's kind of one of those things, right? If I was to be honest with you, and I say, if I invested when I did in 2016 and only invested in Bitcoin, I would probably be a lot wealthier than I am now. That's kind of where I am right now in terms of life. And I honestly believe that. But that's just the reality of it. Whereas I think most people who are watching this channel have done altcoins wrong. But let me explain this one. So when I talk about dominance, I want to keep it brief because I will fucking lose you, I know it. When dominance is low, it's time to take your profits into Bitcoin, basically, if you're holding an altcoin. If it's high, it's time to consider altcoin positions with Bitcoin to maybe grow them, because ultimately what tends to happen here, and there's a bit of a flaw with this, your altcoins are going to look like that. Most of them, even Ethereum doesn't look great, right? Link doesn't look great. So when dominance is high, usually your Bitcoin pair's low, right? That's a good thing. Now, I mentioned there's a bit of a flaw. We didn't really see in the previous cycle of, well, when we had mental returns at the start of this year, so you know when that little bit of a fever came back, this didn't really drop much. It had a few little drops, but nothing crazy. Total 3/BTC actually highlighted that much better. This is a chart to look out for. Total 3/BTC, I mentioned it a lot of times now. When this is low, it's potentially time to buy, because what it is a top 120 coins without Bitcoin, without Ethereum, is an overall index for altcoins. When they're low, it's going to give you that kind of relationship between the BTC pair, which I just mentioned before, with the likes of Polkadot, etc. So that's important to know. The big thing with this is understanding that when they're low, you may have opportunity to buy an altcoin that could do well. Now, the biggest thing is, most people think in USD. So when you look at, say, I don't know, Polkadot or something, right? When this rallied really, really well, kind of, in the previous kind of situation where a bit of hype came in, what did it do in the BTC pair? That's what you're going to ask yourself, right? In the BTC pair, it actually didn't do anywhere near as good. It did a little bit, but actually melted. The main reason why it portrayed a better indication of growth was because the Bitcoin price went higher, right? That's important. You need to get something like NIA, where it goes up a lot more sustained and does well. Even ICP did really well. Oh God, you can't even see it. Did really well in that growth period versus, like, say, Polkadot. Now, when you talk about the price of USD, which often baffles people, the price of Bitcoin is important for any altcoin. If you put in whatever number of sats into Google as a calculator, it will give you a price in dollars. That is what your altcoins are worth. I've mentioned this a number of times, probably bored of it. But ultimately, don't get swayed by altcoins because they're going up. Actually, they might be going up short term due to a dominant situation, or more importantly, due to news or announcements. They need to be sustained. So how do we combat that? Well, you need to be buying your altcoins at the right time. You need to be out of them at the right time. You need to be always looking to grow Bitcoin as your overall wealth. Because if in the future you get one BTC, you might be a part of an exclusive club. Percentage of wealth versus the population of the world may be massively in your favor, because, as we've alluded to, if Bitcoin does go to silly heights and more people want it, it's going to be hard for people to obtain those numbers, and you are realistically in front of those people. You are making more money as they come in. Scarcity is a factor, and as I said here, one BTC is a total of that many addresses in terms of total of how many people are around. You are a part of an exclusive club, and it's ridiculous, right? So as I say, use the numbers, use them well, and always remember, use Bitcoin as your dominant currency. Use runes, use ordinals, even BRC20s if you're on the right wallets, to obtain more Bitcoin over time. Growth in the ecosystem. Get them growing, right? Likewise, if you still want to continue with altcoins, look to take profits into Bitcoin at some point when the dominance drops, when the total 3/BTC rises, when your altcoins, whatever they may be, go higher in the Satoshi value, regardless of what you're holding, then manage that position. If you want to manage it, and in my opinion, I've always said this, if Bitcoin, in your opinion, is too expensive and you're like, oof, I've made a lot of money here, nothing wrong with sitting stable, just like cool off a little bit and redistribute your wealth a little bit. Maybe you want to buy yourself a nice little painting for the wall, maybe. Why not? You can always rebuy back low in the bear market, because there will always be peaks and troughs.